Part 1. Boston's Cage. The grandfather clock in the Hayes mansion struck 11, its deep chime echoing through the mahogany-paneled halls like a death knell. Tabitha Hayes stood at her bedroom window, pressing her palm against the cold glass as she watched the gaslit streets of Beacon Hill below. Tomorrow, at this very hour, she would be Mrs. Cornelius Blackwood, wife to a man older than her own father, with breath that smelled of cigars and hands that reminded her of dried parchment. She was 22 years old, and her life was already over. It's for the family. Tabitha, her father had said 6 months ago, not even looking up from his ledgers when he announced her engagement. The Blackwood fortune will save us from ruin. You'll learn to be content. Content. The word tasted bitter in her mouth, like the laudanum her mother used to take before she died. Her mother, the only person who might have understood, who might have fought for her daughter's happiness. But Eleanor Hayes had been gone for 3 years now, leaving behind only a modest inheritance that her father couldn't touch, and memories of whispered bedtime stories about faraway places where women rode horses and owned land. Tabitha turned from the window and surveyed her room one last time. The ivory wedding dress hung on the wardrobe like a shroud, its Brussels lace and seed pearls catching the lamplight. She'd stood for hours while the seamstress pinned and tucked, creating a gown fit for a Boston society wedding, the kind of wedding that would be written about in the society pages, where everyone would comment on what a fortunate match it was for the Hayes family. Fortunate for everyone except the bride. Her hands trembled as she pulled the small carpet bag from beneath her bed. She'd been preparing for weeks, secreting away practical clothes, a plain wool traveling dress, sturdy boots, cotton undergarments without the torturous corsets Boston society demanded. The inheritance from her mother, converted to banknotes and gold coins, lay wrapped in oilcloth at the bottom of the bag. It wasn't much, but it would have to be enough. From her jewelry box, she took only her mother's simple gold locket and left behind the ostentatious diamond necklace Cornelius had given her as an engagement gift. Let him give it to his next bride. Perhaps she'd be young enough to be his granddaughter, too. The house was quiet as death. Her father had dismissed the servants early, not wanting any gossip before tomorrow's grand event. He was in his study. She knew, drinking brandy and calculating how much of the Blackwood money he could funnel into his failing shipping ventures. Her younger brother Edward was at his club, probably raising toasts to her upcoming nuptials and his own secured future. None of them would miss her until morning. Tabitha slipped into the dark wool cloak she'd hidden behind her summer dresses and picked up the carpet bag. Its weight was reassuring, the weight of possibility, of choice. At her writing desk, she left a single sheet of paper with 5 words, "I choose my own life." The servants' stairs were narrow and dark, but she knew them well from childhood games of hide-and-seek with her mother. Each creak of the old wood made her heart pound harder, but she pressed on, through the kitchen that smelled of tomorrow's wedding feast preparations, out the back door into the March night. Boston's cobblestone streets were slick with late winter rain. She kept to the shadows, her boots splashing through puddles as she made her way toward North Station. The train ticket in her pocket, purchased under a false name at a station across town, promised passage to a place she'd only read about in newspaper accounts and dime novels, Wyoming territory. It was foolish, perhaps, a place full of cowboys and Indians, harsh winters and lawless men, but it was also a place where women could own land, where the rigid rules of Boston society held no sway, where a person could disappear and begin again. Her mother had kept a tattered copy of Western Adventures hidden in her sewing basket, and young Tabitha had read it so many times she'd memorized passages about the vast open skies and the freedom of the frontier. The station loomed before her, its grand architecture a testament to Boston's prosperity. Inside, the waiting room was nearly empty at this late hour, just a few weary travelers and a dozing porter. She purchased a simple meal for the journey and found a bench in the corner, pulling her hood low over her face. "Running away from something, Miss..." The voice made her jump. An elderly woman sat nearby, her wise eyes taking in Tabitha's plain clothes and nervous demeanor. "No," Tabitha said, Then, more firmly, "No, I'm running to something." The woman smiled. "Good for you. Dear, I ran west myself 40 years ago. Best decision I ever made." She pulled out her knitting. "Though I'd recommend you put that gold ring in your bag. Young woman traveling alone doesn't want to advertise she has valuables." Tabitha looked down at her engagement ring, 3 carats of perfect clarity that could have fed a working family for a year. She slipped it off and tucked it into her bag. Her finger felt strange without its weight, but also wonderfully, terrifyingly free. The westbound train arrived with a shriek of whistles and a belch of steam. Tabitha boarded with the other passengers, finding her seat in the ladies' car. As the train pulled away from the station, she watched Boston's lights fade into the darkness. Somewhere in that glittering sprawl, Cornelius Blackwood slept peacefully, dreaming of tomorrow's conquest. Her father counted his future profits. The wedding guests prepared their finery. And Tabitha Hayes no longer the dutiful daughter, the sacrificial bride. The Hayes family's last hope closed her eyes and dreamed of wide-open spaces where a woman could breathe, could choose, could live. The train wheels clacked against the rails, carrying her away from everything she'd known and toward everything she didn't. Wyoming territory. Even the name sounded like freedom. She didn't know what awaited her there: hardship. Certainly, danger, possibly. But whatever came, it would be her choice to face it. For the first time in 6 months, Tabitha smiled. Part 2. Storm on the Prairie. The prairie stretched endlessly before Tabitha, a sea of grass rippling in waves beneath the April wind. She'd been riding for 3 hours since leaving the last way station, her hired mount a docile mare named Buttercup plodding along the barely visible trail. The man at the station had warned her about spring storms, but the morning had dawned clear, and she'd been eager to reach Willow Creek before nightfall. Now, watching the western horizon darken to an ominous purple-black, she realized her mistake. The wind picked up suddenly, violently, bending the grass flat and sending her loose hair whipping across her face. Buttercup whinnied nervously, ears pinned back as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Within moments, the drops became a deluge, and the deluge became a wall of water driven horizontal by the screaming wind. Lightning split the sky, so close that the thunder followed instantly, a deafening crack that sent Buttercup rearing in terror. Tabitha, still unused to riding astride instead of side saddle, lost her grip on the wet reins. The world tilted, spun, and she hit the ground hard, the breath driven from her lungs. By the time she struggled to her feet, Buttercup was gone, disappeared into the gray curtain of rain along with her carpet bag tied to the saddle. Everything she owned, her money, her few clothes, her mother's locket vanishing into the storm. She stood there, rain plastering her dress to her body, and for the first time since leaving Boston, she wanted to cry. What had she done trading the cage of an arranged marriage for death on the prairie? Was this truly better? The lightning struck again, close enough to make her teeth ache, and she stumbled forward, seeking any kind of shelter. But there was nothing, no trees, no rocks, just endless grass and mud and the terrible roaring storm. That's when she saw him. A figure on horseback materialized from the rain like something out of her mother's stories. The man rode low over his horse's neck, moving with the animal as if they were one creature. He spotted her at the same moment, wheeling his mount a massive bay gelding in her direction. "Ma'am," his voice barely carried over the storm. "You hurt." She shook her head, though her ankle throbbed where she'd twisted it in the fall. The man swung down from his saddle in one fluid motion, immediately throwing his oilcloth slicker around her shoulders. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with rain streaming from the brim of his hat. "My horse!" she shouted over the wind. "She ran!" "Worry about that later. We need shelter." He boosted her onto his horse with surprising gentleness, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, solid and secure, as he gathered the reins. "Hold on." The horse, better trained than poor Buttercup, pushed through the storm with steady determination. The man behind her radiated warmth even through their soaked clothes, and she found herself leaning back against his chest, too cold and shocked to worry about propriety. Time lost meaning in the storm. It could have been minutes or hours before the outline of a structure appeared through the rain, a small cabin with a lean-to stable attached. The man rode straight for the stable, dismounting quickly to lead the horse inside. "Can you stand?" he asked, reaching up to help her down. Her ankle buckled the moment she put weight on it, and he caught her before she could fall, lifting her as easily as if she weighed nothing. "I've got you," he said simply, carrying her through a connecting door into the cabin proper. The sudden absence of wind and rain was almost shocking. He set her gently on a wooden chair near a cold fireplace and immediately set about building a fire, his movements efficient and practiced. Within minutes, warmth began to creep into the small space. "Thank you," Tabitha managed through chattering teeth. "I thought I was certain I would die out there." The man looked up from the fire, and she got her first clear view of his face. Weathered but not old, perhaps 30, with serious gray eyes and a day's worth of stubble along a strong jaw. There was something steady about him, calm, like a rock in a river. "Storm came up fast," he said. "Happens sometimes in spring. You're lucky I was heading back from town." He gestured to her soaked dress. "You need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch your death. I've got a spare shirt and pants that'll swim on you, but they're dry." He disappeared into what must have been a bedroom, returning with a bundle of clothes and a rough towel. "I'll see to the horse," he said, and stepped back outside, giving her privacy. Tabitha peeled off her sodden dress with numb fingers, her proper Boston upbringing warring with practical necessity. The man's clothes were indeed far too large. She had to roll the pants legs several times and cinch the waist with a length of rope, but they were dry and warm and smelled faintly of soap and leather. When he returned, water streaming from his hat, he paused in the doorway. Something flickered in his eyes, not the leering assessment she'd feared, but simple concern. "Better." "Much," she gestured helplessly at her bedraggled state. "Though I must look a fright." "You look alive," he said seriously. "That's what matters." He hung his hat and coat on pegs by the door, revealing dark hair that curled slightly where it was damp. "Name's Lucas Wright. This is my place." "Tabitha Hayes," she hesitated, then added, "late of Boston." "Long way from home, Miss Hayes." "Yes," she met his steady gaze, "and grateful for it." He studied her for a moment, and she had the feeling he understood more than she'd said. Then he moved to a shelf, pulling down a tin of coffee. "You hungry? I've got beans and cornbread from yesterday, and coffee'll warm you from the inside." Her stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, and Lucas's serious expression cracked into an almost smile. "I'll take that as a yes." As he worked at the small stove, Tabitha took in her surroundings. The cabin was sparse but clean handmade furniture, a shelf of books that surprised her. No decoration save a faded photograph of a woman who might have been his mother. Everything spoke of a man who lived simply but not carelessly. "You live here alone?" she asked. "Just me and the cattle," he confirmed, setting a plate before her. The beans were savory, the cornbread sweet, and she ate with an enthusiasm that would have horrified her Boston etiquette teachers. Lucas poured coffee black and strong enough to strip paint and sat across from her at the small table. "Your horse probably headed back to the way station," he said. "They know to go home in a storm. Your belongings." Everything was on her. The loss hit her anew, not just the money, but her mother's locket. "I suppose I'm destitute now." "You're alive," he repeated. "Rest can be figured out." The storm continued to rage outside, rain hammering the roof like bullets. But inside the small cabin, with the fire crackling and coffee warming her hands, Tabitha felt oddly safe. This stranger had asked no prying questions, made no improper suggestions. He'd simply helped, as if finding half-drowned women on the prairie was an everyday occurrence. "I'll ride to the way station come morning," Lucas said. "See if your horse made it back. Tonight." He glanced toward the bedroom. "You take the bed. I'll bunk out here by the fire." "I couldn't." "You could and you will." His tone brooked no argument. "I've slept in far worse places than my own floor. Miss Hayes." Something in the way he said it, a weight to the words, made her think of the war that had ended 20 years ago. He would have been young, but not too young to serve. "Mr. Wright," she began, then stopped. How did one thank a stranger for saving your life without sounding trite? He seemed to understand. "No need," he said quietly. "Anyone would have done the same." But Tabitha, thinking of Cornelius Blackwood and her father and all the men who'd seen her as property to be traded, knew that wasn't true. Some men would have saved her and expected payment. Some would have left her to the storm. Lucas Wright had done neither. As she lay in his narrow bed that night, wearing his clothes and listening to the storm gradually exhaust itself against the cabin walls, she thought about Providence. She'd lost everything: her money, her belongings, the security of her plans. But she'd gained something too, though she couldn't quite name it yet. In the main room, she could hear Lucas banking the fire for the night, the quiet movements of a man settling in for sleep on his own floor. Tomorrow would bring new challenges: finding her horse, recovering her belongings if possible, figuring out how to reach Willow Creek with no money. But tonight, she was warm and dry and safe, saved by a quiet cowboy who expected nothing in return. It wasn't the rescue she'd dreamed of in her Boston bedroom, but perhaps it was the one she needed: not a prince on a white horse, but a steady man on a bay gelding, offering shelter from the storm. Part 3. Shelter and Silence. Tabitha woke to sunlight streaming through the small window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. This wasn't her bedroom in Boston with its silk curtains and feather mattress. Then memory flooded back: the storm, the fall, the quiet cowboy who'd saved her life. She sat up, still wearing Lucas's oversized clothes, and heard movement in the main room. Through the doorway, she could see him at the stove, his back to her as he worked. He'd changed into fresh clothes, dark pants, a blue cotton shirt that stretched across his shoulders. There was something peaceful about watching him in his morning routine, unaware of her scrutiny. A soft knock at the bedroom door made her jump. "Miss Hayes' coffee's ready when you are." She finger-combed her hair as best she could and emerged, feeling acutely aware of her borrowed clothes and bare feet. Lucas glanced up from the stove, that almost smile playing at his lips again. "Mornin'. How's the ankle?" She tested it gingerly. "Better, sore, but I can walk." "Good." He poured coffee into 2 tin cups, handed her one. "I need to ride out to check my cattle after the storm. Thought you might come along, see if we can spot any sign of your horse on the way." "I'd be grateful." She sipped the coffee, still strong enough to wake the dead. "Mr. Wright, about last night. I haven't properly thanked you." "Lucas?" he corrected. "And you thanked me fine." He set a plate of biscuits on the table. "Besides, you haven't seen my cooking skills yet. Might want to take back that gratitude." It was a small joke, but it eased something between them. The biscuits were actually quite good, fluffy inside with a golden crust. They ate in comfortable quiet, the only sounds the clink of forks on tin plates and the meadowlarks singing outside. After breakfast, Lucas produced a pair of worn boots. Belonged to a hand who lit out for California last year. Might fit better than going barefoot. The boots were only slightly too large, and Tabitha tucked her pants legs into them, feeling more like a character from her mother's adventure stories than a proper Boston lady. Lucas saddled his bay gelding. She learned the horse was called Silas and helped her mount. "We'll ride double again," he said, swinging up behind her. "Easier on your ankle." The prairie after the storm was transformed. Water pooled in every depression, creating temporary mirrors that reflected the endless blue sky. The grass sparkled with moisture, and wildflowers' red paintbrush. Yellow prairie roses seemed to have bloomed overnight. The violent chaos of yesterday had given way to breathtaking beauty. Lucas guided Silas with subtle movements, occasionally pointing out landmarks, a distinctive rock formation, a lone cottonwood tree, a hawk circling overhead. His voice was low and measured, like he was used to talking more to horses than people. They found a dozen of his cattle huddled in a draw, unharmed but skittish. Lucas dismounted to check them over, moving among the animals with practiced ease. Tabitha watched from Silas's back, noting the careful way he handled each beast, the gentle murmur of his voice calming them. "You know them all," she observed when he returned. "Spend enough time with anything, you get to know it." He swung back up behind her. "That brindle cow there, she had twins last spring, first-time mother, but took to it natural. The big steer with the notched ear, he's always finding breaks in the fence. Smart as a whip and twice as troublesome." She smiled at the affection in his voice. "You talk about them like they're family." "Some ways, they are. More reliable than most people I've known." There was a story there. She sensed, but didn't press. They continued riding, the sun climbing higher, drying the prairie. No sign of Buttercup or her belongings appeared, though Lucas studied the ground for tracks. Back at the cabin, he showed her around properly. The lean-to stable where Silas stayed, a small vegetable garden just beginning to sprout, a root cellar dug into a hillside. Everything was functional, carefully maintained, the work of a man who took pride in self-sufficiency. "You built all this yourself." "Most of it. Had help raising the cabin walls. Man needs neighbors for that. But the rest, yeah." He gestured to the endless grassland. "Homestead Act gave me the land. My sweat gave me the rest." As afternoon wore on, Lucas worked on repairing storm damage to the stable roof while Tabitha, insisting on being useful, tended the garden. The repetitive work of pulling weeds and checking young plants calmed her spinning thoughts. When had she last done something so simple, so connected to the earth? "You know gardens," Lucas observed, appearing beside her. "My mother kept one, before she got sick." Tabitha sat back on her heels, dirt under her fingernails, something that would have appalled her Boston self. "She grew the most beautiful roses. Said flowers were nice, but vegetables kept you alive." "Smart woman." "She was." Tabitha swallowed past sudden tightness in her throat. She would have liked this, the openness, the freedom of it. Lucas was quiet for a moment, then offered her his hand up. His palm was calloused, warm, steady. "Come on, I'll show you something." He led her to a small rise behind the cabin. From there, the view stretched endlessly, grassland flowing like a golden green ocean to meet the sky. The late afternoon sun painted everything in warm honey tones. "When I first came here," Lucas said quietly, "I'd stand here evenings, trying to believe it was real. All this space, nobody telling you what to be, how to live. Just you and the land and what you could make of it." "Where did you come from?" she asked softly. "Ohio, originally. Then the war." His jaw tightened slightly. "Then a lot of places. Looking for somewhere that felt right. Found it here." They stood in companionable silence, watching the sun sink lower. Tabitha felt something unknotting in her chest, tension she'd carried so long she'd forgotten it was there. In Boston, there had always been walls, literal ones of brick and social ones of expectation. Here, there was only space and possibility. That evening, Lucas cooked again salt pork and beans seasoned with wild onions he'd gathered. They ate by lamplight as stars emerged in the darkening sky. More stars than Tabitha had ever seen. "I should go to town tomorrow," she said eventually. "Impose on your hospitality no longer." Lucas looked up from his plate. "You're not imposing, but I'll take you to Willow Creek if you're set on it. Though," he hesitated, "without money or belongings, what's your plan?" It was a fair question. "I can work. I'm educated, good with numbers. Surely someone needs help with accounts or correspondence." "Maybe so." He pushed beans around his plate. Mrs. Carpenter runs the boarding house in town. Christian woman. Might have a room on credit until you're settled. I know the banker too, Samuel Morrison. Decent man, if particular about his ledgers. The careful way he offered help, without pushing or prying, touched her. You're very kind, Mr. Lucas. Not kind, just, he shrugged. Way I see it, we all need help sometimes. You'd do the same. Would she, Tabitha, thought of her life in Boston, where charity was performed at arm's length, where helping someone meant writing a check, not sharing your home with a stranger. I hope I would. After dinner, they sat by the fire again. Lucas pulled a book from his shelf, Robinson Crusoe, and began reading aloud without asking if she wanted him to. His voice was low and rhythmic, transforming Defoe's prose into something almost musical. Tabitha curled in the chair, warm and full and strangely content, letting the familiar story wash over her. When her eyelids grew heavy, Lucas closed the book. Same arrangement as last night. I hate putting you out of your bed again. I've slept on rocky ground with bullets flying overhead. Miss Hayes, my own floor with a warm fire is luxury. She stood, aware again of how his clothes hung on her frame. How improper this all was by Boston standards. But propriety seemed a distant concern here, less important than kindness and survival. Lucas, she paused at the bedroom door. Why did you help me, really? He considered the question, firelight playing across his weathered features. Because you needed it, because I could, because... He met her eyes. Because I remember what it's like to be lost in a storm with no shelter in sight. She nodded, understanding more than he'd said. Good night, then. Good night, Miss Hayes. In the narrow bed that smelled of cedar and soap. Tabitha stared at the rough-hewn ceiling beams and marveled at the turn her life had taken. 2 nights ago, she'd been in Boston, dreading marriage to a man she despised. Now she was sleeping in a stranger's bed on the Wyoming prairie, wearing his clothes, with no money and no clear future. Yet she felt more at peace than she had in months. Lucas asked nothing of her, no payment, no favors, no gratitude beyond what she freely gave. He simply offered shelter and silence, coffee and conversation, a safe place to rest while she found her feet. Through the thin walls, she heard him settling for the night, the creak of floorboards, the rustle of blankets. Tomorrow she'd go to Willow Creek, try to build some kind of life from nothing. But tonight, she was grateful for this, a simple cabin, a generous man, and the vast prairie sky holding more stars than all the gaslights in Boston. Her mother would have understood, she thought drowsily, would have recognized the gift of true shelter, not just walls and a roof, but the space to breathe, to think, to choose who you wanted to become. As sleep took her, Tabitha's last thought was of Lucas reading by firelight, his steady presence asking nothing and offering everything, the radical kindness of letting someone simply be. Part 4. A new town. A new name. The road to Willow Creek wound through rolling grassland, past scattered homesteads and the occasional herd of antelope that bounded away at their approach. Lucas had hitched his wagon for the journey, saying it would be easier on her ankle than riding. Tabitha sat beside him on the bench seat, still wearing his borrowed clothes, trying not to think about how she must look. Town's not much, Lucas said as they crested a rise. But it's growing. Railroad's talking about putting in a spur line next year. Below them, Willow Creek spread out along a meandering stream lined with its namesake trees. Perhaps 24 buildings lined the main street, a general store, a hotel, a saloon, various shops and offices. Smoke rose from chimneys into the clear morning air. It looked nothing like Boston's grand avenues, but something in Tabitha's chest loosened at the sight. They rolled down Main Street, drawing curious glances. Lucas nodded to those they passed but didn't stop, heading directly for a 2-story house at the town's edge. A sign hung from the porch. Mrs. Carpenter's boarding house, clean beds, good food, no drinking. Martha, Lucas called as they pulled up. A woman emerged sturdy, gray-haired, with sharp eyes that took in Tabitha's appearance in one sweeping glance. "Lucas Wright, what trouble have you brought me now?" "No trouble. This is Miss Hayes. Got caught in that storm day before yesterday. Lost her horse and belongings. Needs a place to stay." "Mrs. Carpenter's expression softened slightly. "That storm was a terror. You hurt, dear—" "No, ma'am. Thanks to Mr. Wright." "Well, come in then. We'll sort things out." She fixed Lucas with a look. "You'll vouch for her." "I will." Inside, the boarding house was clean and smelled of baking bread. Mrs. Carpenter led them to a small parlor, gesturing for Tabitha to sit. "Now then, tell me your story, the truth of it." Tabitha glanced at Lucas, who nodded encouragingly. She took a breath. "I'm from Boston. I was expected to marry someone I couldn't accept, so I left. I used my inheritance to come west, start over, only now you've got nothing but the clothes on your back, which aren't even yours." Mrs. Carpenter's tone was matter-of-fact, not unkind. "Running from an arranged marriage. Not the first. Won't be the last." "Can you work?" "Yes, I'm educated. I can read, write, do figures. I know how to keep books, manage household accounts. I can learn whatever else is needed." Mrs. Carpenter studied her. "I charge $2 a week for room and board. You can work off the first month helping with cooking and cleaning. Give you time to find proper employment." "Acceptable." Relief flooded through Tabitha. "More than acceptable. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. I run a respectable house, no gentlemen callers, no drinking, no loose behavior. You'll share a room with Annie Foster. She works at the Mercantile. Breakfast at 6, dinner at 6. Miss either without good reason and you go hungry. Understood." "Understood." Mrs. Carpenter turned to Lucas. "I'll need to fetch her some proper clothes. Can't have her wandering town in men's trousers, even if they are yours." A faint color rose in Lucas's cheeks. "I'll cover the cost. Get her what she needs." "Lucas, no," Tabitha protested. "You've done enough." "Consider it a loan." His gray eyes were steady. "Pay me back when you're able." "Mrs. Carpenter made a sound that might have been approval. "Annie's about your size. Miss Hayes. She'll have something you can borrow until we can get to the Mercantile. Lucas, make yourself scarce for an hour." "Yes, ma'am." He stood, hat in hand. "I'll be at Morrison's bank if you need anything." After he left, Mrs. Carpenter showed Tabitha to a small room under the eaves. 2 narrow beds, a washstand, a window overlooking the garden. Simple but clean, like everything in the house. "That Lucas Wright," Mrs. Carpenter said, pulling a dress from the wardrobe, "is one of the few truly decent men in this territory. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's helped more folks than he'd ever admit. You were lucky he found you." "I know," Tabitha said softly. "Do you—" The older woman's eyes were shrewd. "Because some would see a young woman wearing his clothes, spending 2 nights at his place, and make assumptions. I'm not one of them. I know Lucas's character, but others might talk." "Let them—" The fierceness of her response surprised them both. "He saved my life and asked nothing in return. I won't have anyone speaking ill of him." "Mrs. Carpenter smiled then, the first real warmth she'd shown. "Good. You'll do fine here. Miss Hayes. Now, let's make you presentable." An hour later, Tabitha hardly recognized herself in the mirror. The borrowed dress was simple calico, but it fit reasonably well. Mrs. Carpenter had helped pin up her hair and even produced a pair of worn but serviceable boots. "There," the landlady declared. "Now you look like a respectable woman seeking employment, not a refugee from a cattle drive. Let's go find Lucas and get you properly outfitted." They found him at the bank as promised, deep in conversation with a thin man in spectacles, presumably Samuel Morrison. Both men stood as the women entered. "Miss Hayes," Lucas said. and something flickered in his eyes as he took in her transformed appearance. "This is Sam Morrison. Sam, Miss Hayes is new to town, looking for employment." Morrison peered at her over his spectacles. "Employment, what are your qualifications?" "I was educated at Miss Pemberton's Academy in Boston. I can handle correspondence, ledgers, filing any clerical work you might need." Boston Morrison's eyebrows rose. "And you're seeking employment in Willow Creek?" "I'm seeking a new start. Mr. Morrison, I'm willing to work hard and prove myself." He harumphed. "Well, as it happens, I've been drowning in paperwork since my clerk left for the goldfields. Can you start tomorrow? Trial basis, 50 cents a day. If you prove competent, we'll discuss permanent arrangements." 50 cents a day? In Boston, she'd spent more than that on ribbons. But it was work. Honest work. "I'll be here first thing. 8 sharp. I don't tolerate tardiness." Outside the bank, Tabitha felt lightheaded with relief. In less than 2 hours, she'd found lodging and employment. The West really was a land of opportunity. "Thank you," she said to Lucas, "for everything." "You'd have managed without me," but he looked pleased. "Come on, let's get you those clothes." At Harper's Mercantile, Lucas insisted on purchasing 2 work dresses, undergarments, a nightgown, and basic toiletries. Tabitha kept a careful mental tally she would pay back every cent. The shopkeeper's wife, Mrs. Harper, chatted as she wrapped the purchases. "New in town, how wonderful. We need more young women here. Too many bachelors. Not enough civilization. Are you married, dear?" "No," Tabitha said firmly. "And not looking to be." "Independent woman. Good for you. Though, if you change your mind. We have some fine men here. Why, Lucas Wright himself is—" She glanced at Lucas and fell silent at his expression. On the walk back to the boarding house, Tabitha asked, "Should I have said something different about marriage?" "No." Lucas's voice was quiet. "You were honest. That matters out here." At the boarding house gate, he handed her the packages and a small leather pouch. "Your wages from Morrison won't start for a bit. This'll help with incidentals." She looked inside several silver dollars. "Lucas." "It's a loan," he repeated. "I keep good books too. Miss Hayes, I'll expect repayment with interest." She managed a laugh. "What rate?" "How about a letter now and then? Let me know how you're settling in." He touched his hat brim. "Take care, Tabitha." It was the first time he'd used her given name. "You too, Lucas." She watched him drive away. This quiet man who'd appeared in a storm and changed everything. Then she squared her shoulders and went inside to begin her new life. That evening, she met Annie Foster, a cheerful girl from Missouri who talked enough for 3 people. Over dinner with the other boarders, a traveling preacher, 2 railroad surveyors, and a widowed seamstress. Tabitha began to learn the rhythms of Willow Creek. Morrison's a fair man, Annie assured her as they prepared for bed. Particular about his books, but pays on time. You'll do well there. She paused in braiding her hair. "Is it true Lucas Wright rescued you from the storm?" "Yes." "How romantic. He's quite handsome. Don't you think never courts anyone? Though Mary Harper says he had a sweetheart who died back east. Tragic." Tabitha thought of Lucas reading by firelight, the careful way he'd helped without presuming. He's a good man. "The best," Annie agreed. "Well, good night. Breakfast comes early." Lying in the narrow bed, listening to Annie's soft breathing and the unfamiliar sounds of the town, Tabitha reflected on her first day as a citizen of Willow Creek. She'd given her true name, perhaps foolish if her father sent inquiries. But somehow she couldn't bear to lie, not here where honesty seemed to matter more than propriety. Tomorrow she'd begin work at the bank. Tomorrow she'd start repaying her debts and building her future. But tonight, she allowed herself one moment of pure gratitude for storms that led to shelter, for kind landladies and chatty roommates, for small towns where a woman could start over. Most of all, for a quiet cowboy who'd shown her that some men could be trusted, that help could be given freely, that she was stronger than she'd known. Tabitha Hayes. She whispered to the darkness, trying on her name like new clothes, not the Boston debutante, not the runaway bride, but simply Tabitha Hayes of Willow Creek, Wyoming territory, a woman with work to do and debts to pay and a life to build. It sounded just right. Part 5, Quiet Courtship. Spring mellowed into early summer, and with it, Tabitha's life in Willow Creek found its rhythm. She'd proven herself indispensable at the bank, bringing order to Morrison's chaotic filing system and catching several errors in the ledgers that saved the bank considerable money. Her wages had increased to 75 cents a day, and she'd repaid Mrs. Carpenter for her first month's lodging. The letter to Lucas had been harder to write than any bank correspondence. Dear Mr. Right. She'd begun, then crossed it out. Too formal. Dear Lucas seemed too familiar. Finally, she'd settled on simply Lucas and told him about her work, her small victories, the garden she was helping Mrs. Carpenter establish. She'd sent it with the weekly mail coach, along with $5 silver toward her debt. The money came back the next week with a note. Save your coins for winter boots. The interest I mentioned was letters, not silver. L. So began their correspondence. Every week, she wrote about life in town, the church social where she'd learned to dance the Virginia reel, the day angry cowboys tried to withdraw money they didn't have, how she'd helped the school teacher organize a lending library. His replies were shorter but no less meaningful, telling her about his cattle, a new calf, the hawk that had taken up residence in his barn. Then, one Saturday in late May, he appeared at the boarding house. Lucas. She was in the garden, dirt on her apron, hair escaping from its pins. I wasn't expecting. Needed supplies, he said, but his eyes were warm. Thought you might like to take dinner, if you're free. Annie, who'd been weeding nearby, made a small squeak of excitement that she tried to disguise as a cough. Yes, let me clean up. She washed quickly, changed into her better dress, still simple calico, but a prettier blue that Annie said brought out her eyes. When she came downstairs, Lucas was waiting on the porch, having a serious conversation with Mrs. Carpenter about rainfall. 7 o'clock, the landlady said firmly as they left. Not a minute later. They walked slowly through town, Lucas pointing out changes since her arrival, a new business, fresh paint on the schoolhouse. People nodded as they passed, and Tabitha realized she'd become part of the fabric of Willow Creek without noticing. Where are we going? She asked as they passed the hotel restaurant. Thought we'd try something different. He led her to the creek itself, where someone she suspected him had spread a blanket beneath the willows. A basket sat waiting, and the late afternoon sun filtered through the leaves in dancing patterns. A picnic. She couldn't hide her delight. Mrs. Morrison packed it. Told her it was for, well, he actually flushed slightly. She got enthusiastic. The banker's wife had indeed been enthusiastic. Cold chicken, fresh bread, early strawberries, cheese, and even a bottle of cider. They ate slowly, conversation flowing easier than Tabitha had expected. Lucas told her about finding an orphaned antelope kid, how he was bottle-feeding it despite knowing it was foolish. Not foolish, she said, kind. Practical men don't raise antelope. Maybe the world needs more impractical men. He smiled then, a real smile that transformed his weathered face. How's Morrison treating you? Well, he's trusting me with more responsibility. Yesterday he had me review loan applications. She paused. I saw yours. For the new bull. And I recommended approval. Solid collateral, good payment history, clear purpose for the funds. She grinned. Though I might have suggested slightly better terms than he was offering. Lucas laughed the first time she'd heard it. Rich and genuine. You're going to run that bank someday. A woman bank president, scandalous. This isn't Boston. Out here, What matters is what you can do, not what's expected. After eating, they walked along the creek, her hand tucked properly in his elbow. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold that no Boston sunset had ever achieved. "I need to tell you something," Lucas said suddenly, "about why I keep to myself mostly." She waited, sensing the weight of what was coming. "There was someone, back in Ohio, before the war, Elizabeth. We were engaged." His voice was steady but distant. "I went to fight. When I came back, she'd married another man, said I wasn't the same, that the war had changed me. She was right." Tabitha's heart ached for the young man he'd been. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. She did what was right for her. And it taught me something: you can't force feelings, can't expect someone to be what they're not." He stopped walking, turned to face her. "That's why I need you to know I enjoy your company, Tabitha, more than I expected to, but I won't assume anything, won't push, if friendship is all you want." "It's not," she said quietly, surprising herself with the certainty. "I don't know what I want exactly, but it's not just friendship." Something shifted in his gray eyes, slowly, giving her every chance to step back. He lifted his hand to her cheek. His palm was calloused but gentle, and she leaned into the touch without thinking. "I should probably ask permission," he murmured. "This isn't Boston," she reminded him. "What matters is what we choose." The kiss was careful, almost hesitant, nothing like the possessive claiming she'd feared from marriage. It was a question more than a statement, and she answered by rising on her toes, threading her fingers through his hair. When they parted, both were breathless. "Well," Lucas said roughly, "that was impractical," she suggested, and he laughed again. They made it back to the boarding house with 5 minutes to spare. On the porch, under Mrs. Carpenter's watchful eye from the window, Lucas held her hands. "Can I call on you again proper-like?" "I'd like that." He came the next Saturday, and the one after that. They attended church together, causing a minor sensation and no small amount of satisfied whispering among the town's matrons. He taught her to fish in the creek, laughing when she shrieked at having to bait her own hook. She made him read aloud from the books she borrowed, discovering he had a secret fondness for poetry. By July, the town had accepted them as a courting couple. Men tipped their hats with knowing smiles when Lucas arrived each Saturday. Women found excuses to visit the bank, hoping to glean romantic details Tabitha wouldn't share. "He's taking his time," Annie observed one evening as they prepared for bed. "Most men out here propose within a month of meeting someone." "We're in no rush," Tabitha said, though sometimes when Lucas looked at her across a picnic blanket or helped her down from his wagon, she wondered if that were entirely true. One evening in late July, a summer storm threatened as they sat on the boarding house porch. The air was heavy, electric, reminding her of that first storm that had brought them together. "Scared?" Lucas asked, noting her tension. "No," and she realized it was true. Not anymore. What changed? She thought about it. "I used to be afraid of so many things. Storms, being alone, the future, marriage. Especially—" She looked at him. "You changed that." "How?" "By being patient, by showing me that strength doesn't mean taking, that protection doesn't mean possession." She struggled for words. "In Boston, I was property to be transferred. Here with you, I'm just myself." Lucas was quiet for a long moment. Then he stood, holding out his hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." "I don't need any." She let him pull her up, into his arms. They swayed slowly on the porch as the first raindrops began to fall. And she thought this might be what her mother had dreamed of, not a grand ballroom or society orchestra, but a simple porch, a good man, and the freedom to choose. When the rain drove them inside, Lucas caught her hand. "Tabitha, He stopped, started again. "I'm not good with words, but I want you to know. Whatever happens, however long this takes, I'm not going anywhere." "Neither am I," she promised. He kissed her then, deeper than before, and she felt something fundamental shift inside her chest. Not fear, not obligation, but possibility, warm and bright as summer lightning. Later, lying in bed listening to the storm, Tabitha touched her lips and smiled. Annie was wrong. There was something to be said for taking time, for building trust like a garden, tending it daily until it bloomed on its own. She thought of Lucas riding home through the rain, of next Saturday's visit, of all the Saturdays stretching ahead. Once, the future had been a prison cell with gilt bars. Now it was an open door, and on the other side stood a quiet cowboy with steady hands and patient heart, waiting for her to be ready to walk through. Soon, she thought, very soon. But for now, the courtship itself was enough sweet and slow as prairie honey, built on friendship and choice rather than duty or desperation. She'd fled Boston to escape marriage, only to find herself moving toward it anyway. The difference was, this time she was walking, not being dragged. This time, it was her choice. And that, Tabitha was learning, made all the difference in the world. Part 6, Fire and Foundations. The smell of smoke woke half of Willow Creek at 3 in the morning. Tabitha jolted upright. Annie already at the window. "Fire!" Annie screamed. "The stables!" They threw on wrapping gowns and rushed outside with the other boarders. Orange flames licked at the sky from the direction of Garrett's livery stable, the largest in town. The bell at the Methodist church began clanging frantically, calling all able-bodied citizens to help. Tabitha ran barefoot through the streets, joining the bucket brigade already forming from the creek to the burning building. Men were leading terrified horses from the smoke while others threw buckets of water on the spreading flames. The entire block was in danger, the stable connected to the feed store, which abutted the telegraph office. "Move aside, ladies!" Sheriff Watson shouted. But Tabitha held her ground in the line, passing buckets until her arms ached. She glimpsed Lucas among the men closest to the fire, his shirt already black with soot as he beat at flames with a wet blanket. For 2 hours they fought, and finally, miraculously, the fire began to die. The stable was a total loss, but they'd saved the adjoining buildings. As dawn broke gray and smoky, exhausted townspeople collapsed wherever they could find space. Tabitha found Lucas sitting on the boardwalk, head in his hands. "Are you hurt?" "No." He looked up, and his face was streaked with soot and sweat. "Just tired. You shouldn't have been in the brigade line." "Don't." She sat beside him, uncaring of propriety or her nightgown. "I live here too. I fight for it too." He studied her hair wild, face smudged, hands blistered from rope handles, and something soft entered his eyes. "Yes, you do." Mayor Hutchins called an emergency town meeting that afternoon. The Methodist church was packed, voices rising in worried discussion. Garrett had lost everything, 23 horses, all his equipment, his life's work, without the stable. Farmers couldn't board their animals when they came to town. Travelers had nowhere to keep their mounts, and the stage line would have to relocate. "Insurance?" someone asked. Garrett shook his head miserably. "Couldn't afford it after the drought last year." "We'll take up a collection," Reverend Mills suggested, but everyone knew it wouldn't be enough. Building materials alone would cost a fortune, and Garrett was already in debt from expansion. Tabitha's mind raced, pieces falling into place like entries in a ledger. She caught Morrison's eye and raised her hand. "May I speak?" The church fell silent. Women didn't typically address town meetings. Mayor Hutchins frowned. "This is hardly the place." "Let her talk," Lucas said quietly from the back. "Miss Hayes knows numbers better than most." "Thank you." Tabitha stood, ignoring the stares. "Mr. Morrison, what's the bank's policy on community improvement loans?" Morrison adjusted his spectacles. "Well, we offer them at standard rates for qualifying projects. And if the community itself was the borrower, not Mr. Garrett alone, but the town? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Morrison leaned forward. Go on. What if we formed a collective, a stable company? Citizens could buy shares, say $5 each. That provides initial capital. The bank loans the balance at a reduced rate since the risk is spread. Garrett manages the stable and pays rent to the company. As profits come in, shareholders receive dividends and the loan is repaid. You're talking about the town owning the stable. Councilman Park sounded skeptical. I'm talking about the town investing in itself. Tabitha's voice grew stronger. We all need the stable. Why shouldn't we all benefit from its success, Mr. Garrett keeps his livelihood. The bank has a solid loan backed by the whole community, and citizens get a return on investment. The church erupted in discussion. Some called it too radical, others brilliant. Morrison was already scratching calculations on his notebook. It could work, he announced. We'd need proper incorporation papers, a board of directors, strict accounting, which Miss Hayes could manage. Mayor Hutchins said slowly, if she's willing. Without compensation, Tabitha added quickly, as my contribution to the town. A vote was called. It wasn't unanimous. Some older residents grumbled about newfangled ideas, but it passed decisively. Within an hour, 30 citizens had pledged shares. Lucas was first in line, buying 10 shares without hesitation. The next weeks were a whirlwind. Tabitha drafted incorporation documents with the territorial lawyer, set up accounting systems, and organized work crews. The entire town pitched in. Men hauled lumber and raised walls. Women provided meals for workers. Children cleared debris. Lucas came to town more frequently, ostensibly to help with construction, but often ending up in the bank, watching Tabitha orchestrate finances with quiet pride. You've changed things, he told her one evening as they walked through the construction site. The frame was up, golden in the sunset. This town was dying slowly, people leaving for bigger opportunities. Now they're investing in staying. It's just a stable. No. He stopped walking, turned her to face him. It's hope. It's showing people they can build something together. The grand reopening in September drew visitors from across the county. The new stable was larger than before, with modern safety features and a meeting room upstairs for community use. Garrett, overwhelmed with emotion, could barely speak at the dedication. Tabitha Hayes saw a way forward when we only saw ashes. Mayor Hutchins said in his speech, she reminded us that we're stronger together than apart. After the ceremony, as townspeople toured the facility, Morrison pulled Tabitha aside. I'm getting old, he said bluntly. Need someone to take over more responsibilities at the bank. Interested in becoming assistant manager. Mr. Morrison, women don't. This isn't Boston, he said, echoing Lucas's words from months ago. Out here, what matters is capability. You've proven yours. $1 a day, plus percentage of new business you bring in. She accepted, head spinning. Later, she found Lucas in the stable's hayloft, checking the pulley system. Did you hear Morrison offered? I heard. He was grinning. The whole town heard. Mrs. Harper nearly fainted with excitement. A female assistant bank manager. What will people think? Lucas climbed down the ladder, pulled her into his arms. They'll think Willow Creek is the luckiest town in Wyoming. He kissed her forehead. I'm proud of you. For the stable idea. For being you. For seeing solutions where others see problems. For fighting for this place like you were born here. His voice roughened. For becoming so essential to this town that I can't imagine it without you. Just the town, she asked softly. His hands tightened on her waist. You know better than that. They stood there in the clean-smelling loft, hay dust dancing in the light from the window, and Tabitha felt the foundations of her new life solidify beneath her feet. 6 months ago, she'd been property, a transaction between men. Now she was assistant bank manager, architect of the town's newest enterprise, respected for her mind and determination. "I have something for you," Lucas said, reaching into his pocket. "Bought it after the fire, when I watched you in that bucket line, fighting as hard as any man." He pulled out a small leather pouch. Inside was her mother's gold locket, the one she'd lost with her carpetbag in the storm. "How?" "Found your bag weeks back, caught in some brambles near Willow Creek. Everything else was ruined, but this survived." He fastened it around her neck with careful fingers. "Figured you'd want it back when the time was right." Tabitha touched the locket, tears pricking her eyes. Her past returned, but transformed no longer a chain to Boston, but a bridge to her mother's dreams of freedom. "Thank you," she whispered, meaning more than just the locket. That evening, the whole town celebrated in the new stable. Fiddle music filled the air. Couples danced on the swept floor, and children played hide-and-seek in the stalls. Tabitha danced set after set with Morrison, with Mayor Hutchins, with young men who suddenly saw her differently now that she held position and respect. But she saved the last dance for Lucas, stepping into his arms as the fiddler played a slow waltz. Around them, their neighbors and friends talked and laughed, building community in the space they'd created together. "No more fires," she said. "I'm exhausted from saving the town." Lucas chuckled. "Can't promise that, but next time, we'll rebuild again. Together." Together. The word held weight now. Promise and possibility combined, as they danced in the stable born from ashes and determination. Tabitha understood that she'd found more than refuge in Willow Creek. She'd found purpose, respect, community, and a man who valued her for exactly who she was becoming. The girl who'd fled Boston in desperation was gone. In her place stood Tabitha Hayes of Willow Creek, assistant bank manager, community organizer, and partner to a cowboy who'd waited patiently for her to find her strength. The fire had destroyed the old stable, but revealed something stronger. A town's resilience and a woman's true worth, measured not in marriage prospects or family connections, but in ideas, courage, and the willingness to build something better from the ashes. Part 7, Sunday at the Double W. October arrived in a blaze of gold, painting the cottonwoods along Willow Creek in shades of amber and rust. Lucas appeared at the boarding house early on a crisp Sunday morning, driving his wagon but dressed in his best clothes, clean denim, a pressed white shirt, and boots polished to a shine. "Thought you might like to see the ranch," he said, helping her up to the bench. "Properly, this time. In daylight. Without a storm chasing you." Tabitha had wondered when this invitation would come. She'd prepared carefully her best dress store-bought now with her increased wages, her hair pinned neatly beneath a new bonnet, a basket with fresh bread she'd helped Mrs. Carpenter bake that morning. The ride took 2 hours through countryside she barely recognized from that terrifying night 6 months ago. Now she could appreciate the vast sweep of grassland, the distant mountains purple against the horizon, the hawks circling lazily overhead. Lucas pointed out landmarks, the rock formation called Devil's Throne, the creek where he watered his cattle in summer, the spot where he'd found her horse's tracks before they disappeared. "I still call it the Double W," he said as they crested the final rise. "My brother and I were going to run it together before he died of fever. Kept the name anyway." The ranch spread before them, the cabin she remembered, but also a proper barn, corrals, a bunkhouse for seasonal hands. Everything spoke of careful planning and hard work. Smoke rose from the chimney, and she caught the scent of something cooking. "You started dinner already." "Put a roast in the oven before I left. Figured you'd seen enough of my beans and biscuits." Inside, the cabin was transformed. Still simple, but warmer somehow, curtains at the windows, a rug by the hearth, even a tablecloth on the rough table. He'd added shelves, she noticed, with more books and what looked like a chess set. "You've made improvements," she observed, running her fingers over the smooth wood of a new chair. "Man can't live like a hermit forever." He busied himself with the roast, not meeting her eyes. "Been thinking about the future more lately." They prepared dinner together, moving around the small kitchen with surprising ease. She made gravy while he carved the meat, and they assembled a meal that would have satisfied any Boston dining room roast beef, potatoes, carrots from his garden, her fresh bread. "You can cook," she said, impressed. "Army teaches you to make do, then years alone teach you to make it edible." He poured water from a pitcher, no wine out here, but somehow it suited better. "Mostly I'm good at stew. Throw everything in a pot and hope." They ate slowly, conversation drifting from ranch business to town gossip to books they'd read. Outside, the sun tracked across the sky, and Tabitha felt time slow, stretch, become elastic. No church bells, no bank clock, no schedule but the natural rhythm of the day. After dinner, he showed her around properly. The barn with its sweet hay smell, where the orphaned antelope, now half-grown, butted its head against her skirts, demanding attention. The corrals where his horses dozed in the afternoon sun. The garden plot, larger than she'd remembered, with neat rows of winter vegetables. "It's wonderful," she said, meaning it. "You've built something real here." Still building. He leaned against the corral fence, watching the horses. "Always more to do. Want to add another room to the cabin, maybe a proper root cellar. Need to expand the herd if beef prices stay good." "You could get a loan," she said, slipping into banker mode. "With your credit history and collateral." He laughed. "Even on Sunday, you're working." "Sorry, habit." "Don't apologize. I like that about you, always thinking, planning." He turned to face her. "What do you think about for your own future?" It was a loaded question, and they both knew it. "I used to think only about escape, getting away from Boston, from marriage, from being controlled." She chose her words carefully. "Now I think about building things. The bank, the town, relationships." "What kind of relationships?" Her heart hammered, but she met his gaze, the lasting kind. Something shifted in his expression. He took her hand, led her to a bench he'd built beneath a spreading oak. The late afternoon light slanted golden across the prairie, and somewhere a meadowlark sang. "Tabitha," his voice was rough, "I need to say some things, and I'm not good at pretty speeches, so bear with me." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "When I found you in that storm, I thought I was just doing what anyone would, helping someone in need. But then you stayed those days, and I watched you face losing everything with more courage than soldiers I've known. You didn't cry or complain. You just asked what came next." He squeezed her hand. "Then in town, watching you build your life piece by piece, finding work, earning respect, solving problems others couldn't see. That stable project? You didn't just save Garrett's business. You showed this whole territory what's possible when someone thinks beyond the expected." "Lucas." "Let me finish. I've been alone a long time. Thought I preferred it that way after Elizabeth. But these months, seeing you each week, getting your letters." He turned to face her fully. "I don't want to be alone anymore. Don't want to build this place for just myself." The sun was setting now, painting everything rose and gold. From somewhere in the house, she heard the clock he'd bought ticking steadily. "What are you saying?" she whispered. Instead of answering with words, he stood and drew her up with him, leading her back to the cabin. Inside, he lit the lamps against the gathering dusk, then took something from the mantel, a small wooden box she hadn't noticed before. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl. "Not fancy by Boston standards, but it's honest, like everything out here." Her breath caught. "Lucas Wright, are you proposing—" "Not yet." He smiled at her expression. "I'm asking if you'd accept if I did, because I won't offer what you don't want, won't cage you when you just found your wings." He touched her cheek gently. "But if you think you could be happy here, building this life together, then yes, I'm proposing." Tabitha looked around the cabin at the books and curtains, the evidence of a life being prepared for two. Thought of the town where she'd made her place, the work she loved, the man offering her not ownership but partnership. I need to know something first, she said. Would you expect me to give up the bank, stay here, keep house? Never. His response was immediate. Your work in town is part of who you are. We'd figure it out, maybe keep your room at Mrs. Carpenter's during the week. Come here weekends. Or I could come to town more. Point is, we'd decide together. And if Morrison makes me full manager someday, a wife who earns more than her husband would make me proud, he grinned. Also, would mean we could buy that prize bull from Denver I've been eyeing. She laughed. But there was one more thing. The hardest thing. Lucas, I need time to trust fully, to believe that marriage can be what you're offering and not what I feared. Would you be patient? Tabitha. He set down the ring box, took both her hands. I waited 34 years to find you. I can wait as long as you need. The lamplight flickered between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the first stars were appearing in the darkening sky. Everything hung suspended, balanced on the edge of change. Yes, she said softly. Yes, if you asked, I would accept. Yes, I want to build this life with you. Yes to partnership and patience and figuring it out together. She smiled through sudden tears. But I need to ask you something too. Anything. Will you kiss me again like you mean it this time? He pulled her against him, and this kiss was nothing like their careful public embraces. It was deep and sure and full of promise, speaking all the words they hadn't said yet, when they broke apart, both breathing hard. She saw her own wonder reflected in his eyes. They talked until late, planning and dreaming by the fire, where they'd live, how they'd manage 2 lives between town and ranch, the improvements they'd make, the future they'd build. And when the evening grew late, they faced the moment she dreaded and desired equally. Stay, he said quietly. Not because we must, but because we choose. No expectations beyond what you're ready for. She thought of her terror in Boston, the wedding night she'd fled. But this was Lucas, who'd sheltered her without taking, courted her without pushing, offered marriage without ownership. Yes, she said simply. That night in the cabin where she'd first found safety, Tabitha discovered what her mother might have meant by love, not possession or duty, but gift freely given and received. Lucas was endlessly gentle, endlessly patient, letting her set the pace and place. And when she finally lay in his arms, watching stars wheel past the window, she understood the difference between surrender and sharing. No regrets, he asked softly, stroking her hair. None. She turned to kiss him again. Only wonder that I almost missed this. Running from something that was nothing like what I feared. You didn't miss it, he reminded her. You found it, found me. We found each other, she corrected, as dawn crept across the prairie, painting the world new. Tabitha Hayes, soon to be right, smiled against her cowboy's shoulder. She'd fled Boston as property and found herself treasure. Run from a cage and discovered freedom wore many faces, including the one sleeping beside her, weathered and honest and hers by choice. The future stretched ahead like the prairie itself, vast and full of possibility, challenge and promise combined. But for now, in this Sunday dawn at the Double W, it was enough to be held, to be chosen, to be free. Part 8, a proposal built with wood and words. The November sky threatened snow as Lucas worked on the cabin addition, each hammer strike echoing across the empty prairie. He'd been at it for 3 weeks now, rising before dawn to work before his ranch duties. The new room was taking shape larger than the original bedroom, with windows facing east to catch the morning sun and built-in shelves along one wall. For your books, he'd told Tabitha when she'd asked, and a proper desk where you can work on bank business without clearing the dinner table. She came out weekends now, sometimes staying at the ranch, sometimes returning to town for Monday's early banking hours. They'd fallen into an easy rhythm, though the town buzzed with speculation about when the wedding would be. Before Christmas, Mrs. Harper declared with authority. "Mark my words." "Spring," Annie countered. Tabitha's too practical to plan a wedding during winter. But Lucas had his own timeline, driven by something deeper than seasons or social expectations. He'd seen how Tabitha still tensed sometimes when people mentioned marriage, how she treasured her independence even as she leaned into their partnership. The ring waited in his pocket daily now, but the moment had to be right, built on certainty, not assumption. That moment came unexpectedly on a Thursday evening in late November. Tabitha appeared at the ranch unannounced, driving a borrowed buggy through spitting snow. Lucas heard the horses and emerged from the barn. Concern immediate. "What's wrong? Is it the bank?" "No." She climbed down, flushed with cold and something else. "I had to tell you the most wonderful thing." "Come inside. You're freezing." She barely waited until they were by the fire before the words tumbled out. "My father wrote, 'First time since I left.' Morrison helped him trace me through banking connections." Lucas tensed. "He wants you back." "No, that's just it." She pulled out the letter with trembling hands. He says Mother would be proud, that he was wrong to try to force the marriage. His business recovered without Blackwood's money, and he wants—" Her voice broke. "He wants to know if I'm happy." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing yet. I wanted to talk to you first." She sank into the chair he'd built. "Part of me wants to rage at him. Where was this understanding when I needed it? But another part wants your father's blessing." Lucas finished quietly. "Is that weak of me?" "No." He knelt beside her chair, taking her cold hands. "Family matters, even when they fail us. Question is, what would make you happiest?" She studied their joined hands. "Writing him back, telling him about my life here, about you." She met his eyes. "Would that be presumptuous? We haven't formally—" "Tabitha." He rose, pulling her up with him. "There's something I need to say." He led her to the new room, still smelling of fresh lumber and sawdust. The desk he'd built stood against one wall, the bookshelves ready for filling. Snow had begun falling earnestly outside the eastern windows, creating a curtain of white. "I built this for you," he said simply. "Not because I assumed, but because I hoped. Every board, every nail, was a prayer that you'd want to fill it, that you'd want to make this place, this life, yours too." He reached into his pocket, drew out the ring box he'd carried for weeks, but instead of kneeling, he pressed it into her hands. "This was my mother's, like I told you, but I want it to be more than that." He covered her hands with his. "I want it to be a promise not of ownership or obligation, but of partnership, of building something together that's stronger than either of us alone." "Lucas, let me finish, please." His voice roughened. "I've watched you become yourself these months, seen you grow into your strength, claim your place, build your dreams. I don't want to change any of that. I want to stand beside it, support it, celebrate it." He moved to the window, looking out at the falling snow. "You asked me to wait, and I have, not just for you to be ready, but for me to understand what I'm really asking. It's not for you to be my wife in the way your father understood it, or even the way most folks expect. It's for you to be my partner in everything, the ranch, the town, the future we build." Tabitha opened the box with shaking fingers. The pearl caught the lamplight, simple and perfect. "It's beautiful." "It's honest," he corrected. "Like everything between us." He turned back to her. "So I'm asking, Tabitha Hayes, will you marry me, not because you need shelter or protection, not because the town expects it, but because you choose it? Choose us." She looked from the ring to the room he'd built, to the man offering everything without demanding anything. "I have conditions." Despite the moment's gravity, he almost smiled. "Of course you do." "I keep working at the bank, full-time if Morrison needs me." "Agreed." "We make decisions together, about money, about the ranch, about—" She blushed slightly. "About when to have children." "Wouldn't want it any other way." And if opportunities come, if the territorial government offers me a position, or another town needs a bank president, we'll figure it out together. He stepped closer. Any other conditions? Just one. She took the ring from the box, held it out to him. Put this on me properly, like you mean it. He took the ring, her hand, and slid it onto her finger with reverent care. It fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her. Tabitha Hayes, he said formally. I love you. I respect you. I promise to stand beside you in all things, to support your dreams as my own, to build a life that honors both of us. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Yes, she whispered, then stronger. Yes, Lucas Wright, I will marry you. He kissed her then, deep and sure, and she tasted promise in it, not just of passion, but of partnership, of two lives choosing to become one while remaining whole. When they broke apart, she laughed shakily. We should probably discuss practical matters. When? Where? Whenever you want. Tomorrow or next year? Not tomorrow. I want to do this right, but not next year either. She considered. What about New Year's Day start 1878 as we mean to go on? Perfect. He spun her around the new room. Where? The church, unless. A thought struck her. What about here if the weather's clear? Our friends, the ranch, the life we're building. Even better. He set her down, kept his arms around her. Now, about that letter to your father. They composed it together at the kitchen table, snow falling steadily outside. Tabitha wrote while Lucas suggested phrases, creating a message that was both daughterly and independent. Dear Father, I am happier than I ever imagined possible. I work as assistant manager at the Willow Creek Bank, am respected in my community, and have found a man who values me as an equal partner. Lucas Wright and I will marry on New Year's Day. Your blessing would mean much, but is not required for my happiness. I am, as Mother always hoped, free to choose my own path. That freedom led me to choose love. Your daughter, Tabitha. Think he'll come? Lucas asked as she sealed the letter. I don't know. Part of me hopes not. I want our day to be about the future, not the past. She touched the ring, still marveling at its weight. But I'm glad he knows. Glad I can tell him I'm happy and mean it. They spent the evening planning simple things like food and flowers, complex things like how to balance two lives between ranch and town. Morrison had already offered his house for weekday nights when needed. Mrs. Carpenter promised to keep her room available for emergencies. It won't be conventional, Lucas said as they sat by the fire, her head on his shoulder. Nothing about us has been conventional, she reminded him. Why start now? Outside, the snow had stopped, leaving the world white and new. The clock ticked toward the hour when she should return to town, but neither moved. Stay tonight, he said quietly. Not for any reason, but that I want to wake up tomorrow knowing it wasn't a dream. She stayed, sleeping in his arms in the bed they'd soon share as husband and wife. When morning came, bringing crystalline light through frost-etched windows, she woke to find him watching her with wonder. Second thoughts, she asked. Never, you. Never. She kissed him softly. Though I do have one more condition. What's that? Teach me to rope cattle. A rancher's wife should know these things. He laughed, rich and warm. Tabitha Wright, you'll be the death of me. Tabitha Wright, she repeated, trying on the name. I like how that sounds. So do I, he agreed. So do I. As she dressed for the ride back to town, where news of their engagement would spread like wildfire, Tabitha touched the pearl ring and smiled. She'd write to her father, post the banns, plan a wedding that honored their unique partnership. But first, she'd stand in this room built by loving hands and marvel at the journey from fear to freedom, from property to partner. Lucas appeared in the doorway with coffee, and she met his eyes in the mirror. No regrets. Never, they said in unison, then laughed at the harmony. Outside, the sun climbed higher, setting the snow-covered prairie ablaze with diamond light. A new day, a new season, a new life taking shape as deliberately and carefully as the room where she stood, built with wood and words, patience and promise, strong enough to last a lifetime. Part 9. The Life They Built. The first year of marriage taught them both about compromise. Spring brought unexpected challenges: a late blizzard that trapped Tabitha in town for a week, a banking crisis that required her to work 18-hour days, and Lucas's prize bull developing a costly illness. But they weathered each storm together, even when apart. "It's not conventional, Mrs. Carpenter observed, watching Tabitha pack her overnight bag for the ranch one Friday evening. "Most husbands wouldn't tolerate their wives working in town half the week. Most wives wouldn't tolerate being told what they can and can't do." Tabitha replied with a smile. "Lucas and I are partners, not owner and property." The arrangement worked better than even they had hoped. 3 nights in town, 4 at the ranch. Morrison, impressed by her handling of the spring crisis, had made her full manager when he semi-retired, keeping only an advisory role. The salary increase allowed them to hire a permanent hand for the ranch, freeing Lucas to spend more time in town when needed. Their first real argument came in June, over something neither had expected. "You're being stubborn," Tabitha said, pacing the cabin's main room while Lucas sat at the table, jaw set. "I'm being practical. We don't need charity." "It's not charity." She waved the letter from her father. "It's a wedding gift, a very delayed one. Granted, but $5,000 isn't a gift. Tabitha, it's a fortune. It's guilt money." She stopped pacing, struck by the edge in his voice. "Is that what this is about? You think he's trying to buy forgiveness?" "Aren't he?" Lucas pushed back from the table. "He couldn't be bothered to come to our wedding, but now he wants to throw money at you." He explained that Cornelius Blackwood was threatening a breach of promise suit. Father thought his presence would cause more harm. Convenient. They stared at each other across the kitchen they'd shared for 6 months, and Tabitha felt the first real fracture in their partnership. "What's really bothering you?" she asked quietly. "Because the Lucas Wright I married doesn't usually care about other people's motives, just their actions." He was quiet for a long moment, then sighed. "Your father's money could buy improvements we won't be able to afford for years. Better breeding stock, expanded acreage, a proper windmill for irrigation. But taking it feels like admitting I can't provide for you properly." "Oh, Lucas." She moved to him then, taking his hands. "Is that what you think, that you need to provide for me?" "I'm your husband." "You're my partner," she corrected firmly. "I bring in salary from the bank. You bring in cattle profits. We build together. Remember this money? Yes, it's from my father. And yes, he's probably trying to ease his conscience. But it's also my inheritance, held back when I fled. We can use it to build our dreams faster, or we can let pride keep us small. Which serves us better?" He studied their joined hands. "When you put it that way. Besides," she added with a grin, "think how horrified Cornelius Blackwood would be, knowing the dowry he expected is going to buy Wyoming cattle. That alone makes it worthwhile." Lucas laughed despite himself. "You're a dangerous woman. Tabitha Wright. You knew that when you married me. They took half the money a compromise. Enough for significant improvements, but not so much that Lucas felt bought. The rest went into the bank's reserve fund, strengthening the institution that served their community. By their first anniversary, the changes were remarkable. The Double W had doubled its herd, the cabin had gained a proper kitchen wing, and Tabitha had established a lending program for small farmers that was being copied by banks across the territory. They celebrated quietly, a dinner at the ranch with just themselves. Tabitha had learned to cook properly, Mrs. Carpenter's lessons finally taking hold, and she made Lucas's favorite pot roast while he baked a cake that tilted alarmingly but tasted perfect. One year, he marveled as they sat by the fire afterward, Feels like yesterday and forever at once. Any regrets? It had become their ritual question. Only one. At her alarmed look, he smiled. I wish I'd built that desk bigger. You've already filled it with papers. She laughed, curling against him. I may have news about that soon. Oh. Morrison wants to retire completely. He's recommending me for full president. She felt Lucas tense and added quickly. It wouldn't change anything. Same schedule, same arrangement. President of the bank. He shook his head in wonder. My wife, the bank president. What will the territory say? Probably that Willow Creek remains unconventional. Are you all right with it? He kissed her temple. I'm proud of it. Proud of you, though... He hesitated. There's something else to consider. Something that might change our schedule needs. Now she tensed. What? Nothing bad, just... I've been thinking. We've been married a year. We've proven our partnership works. Maybe it's time to think about... expanding. The ranch. The family. Oh, she'd known this conversation would come. Had been half dreading, half anticipating it. You want children. I want what we both want. If you're not ready, I might be, she said slowly. I've been thinking about it too. Watching the Hendersons with their new baby, seeing how happy they are. But Lucas, I won't stop working. I won't become just a mother. I wouldn't ask you to. We'd figure it out like everything else. Mrs. Carpenter's already offered to help with child care. Annie too. And I'm here half the week now anyway. She turned to study his face. You've given this thought. Haven't you? She had, late at night, sometimes. She imagined a child with Lucas's steady eyes or her determination. Imagined teaching them to read by the fire, to ride across the prairie, to see possibility everywhere. All right, she said. Let's see what happens. No pressure, no schedule. Just openness to possibility. His arms tightened around her. I love you, Tabitha Wright. Even when I'm being unconventional. Especially then. The second year brought new challenges. A drought that stressed the range. A run on the bank that Tabitha navigated with steady nerves and creative solutions. The loss of Lucas's favorite horse to colic. But it also brought deep joy the successful harvest despite the drought. The town's celebration when Tabitha was officially named bank president. And on a cold December morning, the knowledge that their family would indeed be expanding. You're certain? Lucas asked for the third time as they sat in the Dr. Hawkins' office. Quite certain, the doctor assured him. Late summer, I'd say. Congratulations to you both. Outside, snow fell gently on Willow Creek's main street. Tabitha tucked her hand into Lucas's elbow, feeling dazed. A baby, she said. We're having a baby. Are you happy? He looked anxious, as if she might have changed her mind since their anniversary conversation. Terrified, she admitted. Excited, worried about the bank, thrilled, scared I'll be a terrible mother, delighted. She laughed shakily. I'm everything at once. You'll be wonderful, he said firmly. Look how you've mothered this whole town organizing, solving problems, making things grow. A child will be lucky to have you. And you, she said, patient, steady, kind you. They walked slowly through the snow, planning in the way they'd become accustomed, practically, together. Annie could take more responsibility at the bank. They'd hire additional help at the ranch. The new kitchen was large enough for a cradle. No Boston nannies, Tabitha said firmly. I won't hand our child off to strangers. Agreed, though your father will probably offer to pay for one. Her father? They'd corresponded regularly now, finding a careful peace in letters. He'd even invested in the territorial railroad bonds on her recommendation, trusting her financial judgment in a way he never had before. Let him offer, she said. We'll decline politely. This child will be raised by us, by our community, Western style. Lucas grinned. Poor thing, learning to rope cattle before they can properly walk, and to balance ledgers before they can write, to read by firelight, to judge good horse flesh, to treat people fairly, to choose their own path. Tabitha finished softly. Always, always to choose their own path. They reached the boarding house, where Tabitha still kept her room for busy weeks. As they climbed the porch steps, Mrs. Carpenter appeared at the door, took one look at their faces, and beamed. Finally, I was wondering when you two would get around to it. Come in, come in. This calls for tea and cake. As the landlady bustled about, fussing over Tabitha and already planning baby clothes, Lucas caught his wife's eye. No regrets. Never, she said, meaning it fully. The girl who'd fled Boston in terror of marriage and all it meant sat in a Wyoming boarding house, pregnant by her cowboy husband, president of a territorial bank, surrounded by chosen family. The life they'd built was nothing like what she'd imagined that night on the westbound train. It was harder in some ways, simpler in others, but entirely, authentically hers. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing the prairie in fresh white. Come summer, their child would be born into a world of vast skies and endless possibilities, raised by parents who chose each other daily, who built their life decision by decision, season by season. Tabitha touched her still flat stomach and smiled. Another adventure beginning. Another chance to prove that partnership could create something stronger than ownership ever could. The life they'd built was good, solid, true like the ranch, like their love, like the future stretching before them as wide and promising as the Wyoming sky. Part 10. 10 years and one dance. The Grand Hotel in Cheyenne was grander than anything in Willow Creek, with its crystal chandeliers and polished floors that reflected the gaslights like mirrors. Tabitha smoothed the silk of her evening gown, a deep sapphire that Lucas had insisted on buying for this occasion, and watched her husband adjust his string tie in the mirror. 10 years, she marveled. Sometimes it feels like yesterday I fell off that horse in the storm. Lucas turned, taking in her appearance with the same wonder he'd shown on their wedding day. You're more beautiful now than you were then. How is that possible? Flatterer. But she smiled, pleased. At 32, she bore the marks of a decade's hard work and 3 children, but she'd never felt more comfortable in her own skin. The Territorial Bankers Association annual ball was in full swing when they entered. Heads turned they always did when the only female bank president in Wyoming arrived. Tabitha had grown used to it, the whispers and speculation. Tonight, she held her head high, proud of what they'd built. Mrs. Right. Governor Warren himself approached, his wife on his arm. I was hoping to speak with you about your agricultural lending program. We're considering implementing it territory-wide. As Tabitha discussed interest rates and risk assessment with the governor, Lucas stood beside her, solid and supportive as always. She caught him hiding a smile when she corrected the territorial treasurer's mathematics and squeezed his hand in silent communication. The band struck up a waltz, and Lucas bowed formally. May I have this dance, Madam President? Always, she replied, letting him lead her onto the floor. They'd both learned to dance properly over the years, no more swaying on porches to imaginary music. But as they moved through the steps, Tabitha remembered that first dance in the rain, when everything was new and uncertain. What are you thinking? Lucas asked. About how far we've come. That girl who ran from Boston would never recognize herself now. I would, he said quietly. The courage was always there. You just needed space to let it grow. Around them, other couples swirled, bankers and merchants, ranchers and railroad men, all the people building the new West. But for Tabitha, there was only Lucas, only this moment, only the miracle of their unlikely partnership. Do you ever regret it? He asked suddenly. Not having a conventional life. She thought of their unconventional life, the week split between ranch and town. The children who spent as much time in the bank as the nursery, learning numbers alongside their letters. Young James, 7 now, could already calculate interest in his head. 5-year-old Eleanor had her own ledger for tracking egg money from the chickens. Baby Margaret, just 2, toddled between the bank tellers like she owned the place, which, Tabitha supposed, she partly would one day. "Never," she said firmly. "Do you?" "Only when James asks why other mothers don't work at banks," Lucas said wryly. "Hard to explain that we're unusual." "We're pioneering," Tabitha corrected. "Someone has to go first." The song ended, but Lucas kept her close for the next one, around them. She heard snatches of conversation, drought concerns, railroad expansion, the possibility of statehood, all things that would affect their life, their children's lives. "I have something for you," Lucas said, producing a small velvet box from his pocket. "Lucas, you already gave me the gown. 10 years deserves something special." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold locket on a chain. "Open it." Inside was a tiny photograph, their whole family on the ranch house porch, taken just last month by the traveling photographer, all of them squinting in the sun, the children fidgeting, but together, complete. "It's perfect," she whispered. He fastened it around her neck, where it lay warm against her heart. "Like our life. Not always easy, but perfect for us." Governor Warren approached again as they left the dance floor. "Mrs. Wright, I wonder if you'd consider a position on the Territorial Banking Commission. We need someone with practical experience and innovative ideas." Tabitha glanced at Lucas, who nodded slightly. "I'd be honored. Governor, though I should warn you, I don't believe in doing things the traditional way." "That's exactly why we need you," Warren replied with a smile. Later, in their hotel room overlooking Cheyenne's gas-lit streets, Tabitha sat brushing her hair while Lucas pulled off his formal boots with a grunt of relief. "Territorial Banking Commission," he said. "My wife, shaping policy for all of Wyoming. What's next, Governor, yourself?" "Don't be ridiculous," she laughed. "Though if women ever get the vote—" "When," he corrected. "When women get the vote. This territory's too practical to ignore half its citizens forever." She set down the brush, moved to sit beside him on the bed. "Do you really think so?" "I know so. Look at you, look at what you've accomplished. You think Wyoming can afford to waste that kind of talent?" He pulled her close. "Our daughters will vote. Mark my words. And our son will think it's normal, natural, the way things should be." They sat quietly, listening to the sounds of the city so different from their prairie silence. Tomorrow they'd take the train home, back to the life they'd built piece by piece. The ranch was thriving, the bank solid and growing. Their children were healthy, smart, loved. They had friends, respect, purpose. "Lucas," Tabitha said softly. "That night in the storm when you found me, did you know?" "Know what?" "That we'd end up here, like this." He considered. "No, I just knew you needed help, and I could give it." He kissed her temple. "But somewhere between the cabin and town, between that first letter and the first kiss, I started hoping. And now I know that the best things in life come from the unexpected. A storm bringing a Boston lady to my door. A marriage that broke all the rules. Children who'll grow up believing anything's possible." A knock at the door interrupted the hotel staff delivering the champagne Lucas had ordered. They toasted quietly, mindful of propriety even after 10 years. "To the next 10 years," Lucas proposed. "To continuing adventures," Tabitha added. They drank, the bubbles tickling her nose, and she thought about time, how it moved both fast and slow, how a moment could change everything, how building a life was like building a house board by board, choice by choice, until suddenly you had something solid and true. "Dance with me," she said suddenly. "Here, now." "There's no music?" "There wasn't that first time either." So they danced in their hotel room, in their fancy clothes and bare feet, to music only they could hear. And when Lucas spun her, Tabitha caught a glimpse of them in the mirror, older. Yes, but also deeper, richer, more themselves than they'd ever been. "No regrets?" he asked. Their traditional question. "Not one," she answered. "Not a single one." The woman who'd fled Boston in terror had found her courage on the Wyoming prairie. The man who'd chosen solitude had discovered that partnership multiplied joy. Together, they'd built something that shouldn't have worked but did, a marriage of equals, a life of purpose, a future bright with possibility. As they swayed together in the lamplight, Tabitha touched the locket at her throat and smiled. Love, she'd learned, was nothing like she'd feared. It wasn't a cage or a conquest. It was a choice, made daily, to build something together that neither could create alone. It was Sunday dinners and bank ledgers, cattle drives and school programs, arguments about money and laughter over breakfast. It was work and rest, challenge and comfort, independence and unity all at once. It was a cowboy who waited, who offered shelter without taking freedom. It was a woman who ran toward her life instead of away. It was 10 years in one dance, with a lifetime more to come. And it was perfect not despite its imperfections, but because of them, like Wyoming itself, wild and civilized, harsh and beautiful, demanding everything and giving back doubled. Tabitha Hayes Wright, bank president and rancher's wife, mother and pioneer, pulled her husband closer and whispered, "Thank you." "For what?" "For finding me in that storm." "Thank you," he replied, "for getting lost in the first place." They laughed, they danced. They loved two souls who'd found their way home to each other across an endless prairie sky, proving that sometimes the best love stories begin with the courage to choose differently. And in that hotel room high above Cheyenne, as night wrapped around the city and stars wheeled overhead, they held each other close and knew this was what freedom looked like. This was what love could be when fear stepped aside. This was their happily ever after, built by hand, chosen by heart, earned by trust, forever and always, exactly as it should be. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying these Wild West tales from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and discuss our thoughts together. If you enjoyed this journey of love and courage on the frontier, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more listeners discover these heartfelt stories of the American West. Until next time, partners.